I think we're in for a very delightful evening. We got a little bit of foretaste at dinner tonight with Dr. Sarah Estelle, and so we welcome you here to the campus. And if I can, I just say a little bit about her. Associate Professor of Economics at Hope College. You know where that is. Some of you had a choice to go there but chose to come here. Thank you very much. And so she's also a research fellow at the Acton Institute. Where have you heard the Acton Institute mentioned, right? You probably haven't, but right, we use some of their materials in a number of our classes here. I think several professors have used the Poverty Cures series. That's one of the things that the Acton Institute put together. They do so many more things. Sarah's also, she's founded the Hope's College, or Hope College's Markets and Morality student organization. And I think that would be a, would you want to do a branch here and come down?
I'm thinking of franchising it.
I like it, I like it. They explore economic issues through a Christian lens, and how many meetings do you have?
We have 2 reading meetings a month, and then we bring speakers and films to campus as well, so we keep pretty busy.
Wow.
Get together about once a week.
Can you imagine having to do that? I mean, I know it would take away from the games and the sleeping.
We're also going to the UK in May.
Ooh, now that could, I might sign up for that.
That's with pilgrimage.
Oh, really? I mean, spend a little time just going to Scotland or
Yes.
just move around too?
Yeah.
Love Scotland. At any rate, when I read about Dr. Estelle, and Samantha and I were conversing with the Institute for Humane Studies, we really appreciate their helping to make tonight possible, and they've enabled us to bring a number of speakers to campus. But when we were casting about, we wanted to find someone we felt that really understood microeconomics, you know, from the human interaction standpoint, and also who had some background with some people you may not know too much about, but Hayek and others, and Dr. Estelle certainly brings that expertise here to our campus. She likes to be involved in microeconomic research on topics including parenting. I'm not looking at anybody, but parenting, investments in higher education, welfare policy, criminal justice reform, and so I think we're in for a real treat tonight. And she also earned her PhD. I mean, I'm sorry, your undergrad was from Hillsdale, right? And your PhD was from the University of Virginia. So let's welcome Dr. Estelle. We look forward to
Thank you very much. I feel very welcome. I had a lovely meal earlier at a Slice of Spice.
Yeah.
And it's just been a nice time so far in Spring Arbor, and I appreciate getting a little view of your beautiful campus as well. I'm just a big nerd. I love college campuses. I love college students, and so I'm just really glad to be with you. I also love economics, which is not the reason that this talk has its title, although I'm sure many of you were thinking that was the connection between economics and love. That's what you're doing here, right? Is you love economics too. Why else would you be here? I'm sure there's no extra credit or class requirement or any of these other things that might be involved, but I hope what we'll discuss tonight will pique your interest in economics if you don't kind of find that more organically in your own kind of experience with studying economics. I think economics just has broad implications for all sorts of human issues and deserves the attention of anyone who really cares about themselves, their families, and their neighbors as well. So economists have particular ways of thinking about all sorts of things, actually, and even ways of thinking about love. But I want to suggest one to you that, in fact, if I'd been here last week, might have been more timely. I think it was last Saturday was Sweetest Day. Maybe I'll just say that I'll give you 4 months lead time on Valentine's Day. Let me suggest to you that one thing economics can contribute to your love life is romantic sentiments like this. If you have a sweetie in your life, why not really make the point of your love by explaining to them that the marginal returns of spending time with you will never diminish. What is more romantic than saying my utility or my happiness is a linear function of time spent with you? So economics has a lot to contribute to the way that we love. Now, obviously, this is a joke. I want to get much deeper with an idea of love, really rooted in what I consider to be theological truth, right? So I want to dig into Christian worldview. We can look at it from a perspective of classical philosophy as well. So let's start by talking about what I mean with the word love. It's probably easiest to start with what I don't mean. What I don't mean is, a wish, like I wish you well, right? I hope things work out for you. I don't mean something like a love of mankind, right? Really, philosophers would tell us you can't love mankind. Right? Love is not a hypothetical thing. It's not good feels, right? It's not an emotion. It's also not what some economists will characterize love as, which is interrelated utility functions. Meaning that because I love my husband, his utility or satisfaction is an input to my utility or satisfaction, and vice versa. Though I believe that's an accurate take, and an appropriate way, I think, sometimes to model love. When we're really wanting to focus in on love, we need something much more nuanced than that. And in fact, if you look at the most meaningful relationships in your life, perhaps your parents, and how they've loved you, most people wouldn't look at a parent who just wants to make their kid happy as a loving parent, right? Or as good of a parent as they could be. If you just want to make a 3-year-old happy, don't make them eat broccoli. Right, but we actually look at parents who have the discipline and the stamina to make a small child eat their vegetables as truly loving, right? So it's not just when you're happy, I'm happy. It's something deeper than that. So my preferred definition actually comes from 13th century friar St. Thomas Aquinas. Anyone ever heard of Aquinas before? So I'm not a Catholic, but this definition of love actually shows up in the Catholic Catechism. It goes back to, it's very closely related to a statement from Aristotle. But I really like this. I'm an evangelical like the founders of Spring Arbor University, actually, but I love to look at Catholic theology for things like this, because this is just a wonderfully concise, memorable definition of love that is just dense with meaning, which makes it so much more appropriate in application. So love is to will the good of the other. And so will, what is meant by will? We have to unpack this. So again, it's not wish, it's not want, it's not kind of hope, it's not throw good vibes or juju out into the universe and hope it comes back to benefit people we say we care about. It's actually to orient ourselves towards the good of someone else, to survey the available options, to discern among them, to act according to the good of someone else. It's an orientation, it's an action, it's a choice to do good, right? So it's not just a hope that good will happen, but it's cognitive, it's selecting among available options in order to have the consequences that will actually be good for someone else. So how about this notion of the good? This is multiple lectures in and of itself. What is the good? For those of us who hold to the Christian faith, we're probably familiar with the idea that God is the ultimate good. God, all goodness comes from God, right? And so God is good. And in light of that, the most loving thing we can do for someone else is to nurture, facilitate, act according to their right relationship with God. That would be the ultimate good, wholeness and in relationship with God. But in the here and now, and on right earth and in the kingdom yet to come, we also have notions of things like flourishing. Okay, and I think this is where we can also segue to those who might not ascribe to the Christian faith or want something that's more pluralistic in our ability to apply it. And I think it does here, right? Whether an individual believes they're made in the image of God or not, they are. They have creative capacity. They've been created with a purpose. They have potential. And so when we think about human flourishing, we're talking about living into that potential. So what is the good? It's to facilitate that flourishing, to work according to what is the purpose of the person who we love. Okay, so it's not happiness, it's not just satisfaction. Certainly there will be times of happiness and satisfaction and fulfillment, but flourishing, really living into our purpose and what we're created to be, to love someone is to work in that direction, to choose accordingly. And I think it's worth saying at least one thing about the piece that ends this definition, the other. It's important that when we love someone, we don't see them as the object of these choices, but rather the subject, that they're central to this, right? It's not about us, and it's not about us using them as part of our story, but rather orienting ourselves toward them with gift and sacrifice for their good. So you can see that although a concise definition, it's really thick. There's a lot going on here. And none of it seems immediately to tie in with probably anything you've learned in an economics class. But I think there's a really important connection. And that is that this definition of love says that we actually have to do good, not just want good. We actually have to care about the consequences of our actions. And I think that's one way that economics contributes to a thorough understanding of love, is an understanding what can we do in order to achieve actual good for another. So economics speaks to how we should love. It speaks to that now that we've defined love. You've probably more often heard people refer to the economic way of thinking rather than the economic ways of loving. So let's do a bit of a review. How many folks in here have had an economics class? Okay, so much of this is going to be review, and for those who haven't, that's fine because we're going to cover some of the big points. I think a basic literacy in economics is crucial for everyone. Yes, I do research on parenting, on adolescent risky behavior, on criminal justice reform. I think economics speaks to all of these things. And one reason it's got such broad applicability is because economics is not a study of money or stock markets or profits. It's just the study of human behavior. So whatever your current definition of economics is, if it's not as broad as study of human behavior, broaden it for me, will you? Work with me here, because this is what I'm going to expect, is that we're going to think of economics as a study of human behavior. Now, if we leave the definition there, it's hard to distinguish economics from psychology or sociology, other social sciences, right? Other social scientists are also interested in the human experience. There are particular ways of economic thinking. One of them is that we're really interested in cause and effect. So we don't want to just know about people's intentions in their actions, right? What they're hoping will be the result. We actually want to know, does X cause Y? Does my approach to poverty alleviation in my community actually have that effect? And when we talk about quantitative empirical work in economics, this is the primary goal, is to really get into those causal mechanisms, to really know that X is causing Y. But even in the broader economic way of thinking, we understand that so often human actions have unintended consequences. That human behavior is so complex, it's hard to predict everything. And so economists are just going to be very deliberate in thinking through consequences. Notice how important that is if love is to will the good of the other. This is not an easy thing, to love people, to actually do good for them. Right? It's not easy when you realize that consequences are difficult to predict. So another viewpoint that economics brings that I think is critical to our understanding of loving behavior is to look full in the face of reality and take it for what it is. We are constrained as human beings by our nature, but also in the created world by a universal state economists refer to as scarcity. Okay. Rich and poor countries long ago, and God willing, or God ordaining millennia in the future, there will be scarcity. That is a limited supply of resources. If nothing else, we all have limited time, right? And because of scarcity, we have to make choices. choices wouldn't be interesting if you could literally have your cake and eat it too. As an economist, I wouldn't care if you had it or not, because you can do both, right? And the decision to go to college wouldn't be that interesting because you could simultaneously not go to college, right? Your decision of who to marry wouldn't be interesting because, oh, I don't know if I like where that goes exactly, but notice the choice is only interesting when you sacrifice something. And that's why we have to be deliberate about these things, especially when we want to be loving towards someone. When we have scarce resources to do that, to love people in our community or in our families, we have to think about what is the opportunity cost of our decisions. An opportunity cost is just a technical way of saying, what is it that you've given up? What has been sacrificed? Okay, so when it comes to providing education in a community, that might mean giving up health care. Right? Or it might mean giving up public parks or public plays or time with your family, right? That we're drawing on a given amount of resources, and in selecting one end for those resources, we're giving up others. And so economists are going to continually remind us, whatever we do, there will be costs. It's my theory, actually, that that's how economics retains the moniker the dismal science. I know that's not the source of the moniker, but I think that's why we hold on to it. I think kind of proudly. I don't mind being dismal if dismal means that I point out reality, where reality exists. But I think that's helpful to know. If we truly want to love people in reality, we need to accept what, as a Christian, I would call the created order. I mean, this is the way things are. Humans weren't meant to be gods. Right? And certainly after the fall, we know that there are all sorts of evidences of brokenness and limitations. So one thing I probably will be adding to the toolbox of even those of you who have taken some economics courses is some insight from one of my favorite economists. And I want to put this under the category of constraints, because one of the major contributions of F.A. Hayek is the observation that knowledge is dispersed, that knowledge is local. That is the actionable, interpretable sorts of information that people need to make sound decisions. It's particular to time and place. Now, he's well known for using this observation to argue against central planning, or socialism, or communism, right? And argue for markets. Because his argument is, because there's so much valuable knowledge throughout society, no one person or small group of individuals can collect all of that up and make sound decisions. It's just not possible. So I experienced local knowledge tonight when we were coming from a slice of spice. It would have taken me 5 minutes to get here, but instead it only took 3. Because Sam led us through parking lots and down kind of a dirt-covered road, and she knew that they were putting curbs in now at the marathon station, so we had to take a slightly different path. That's local knowledge. You can imagine what that means for business people, for example, in making business decisions based on where they see excess supply of some input in their local community, right? Or they see a particular desire or demand within a community for something new. And it's not just that they have a theoretical notion of how business operates, or that they have some numbers or a picture on a flow chart, or someone's communicated something via the computer. They actually know what the data means, and they're in a position to act on it. So Hayek makes a distinction between knowledge and facts, knowledge and data, and I think in this way anticipates that even in an age of big data like we have now, knowledge, true, actionable, interpretable, meaningful knowledge is still dispersed. Okay, this is going to have big implications for how decision-making authority should be distributed as well. But this is a constraint, right? It's part of human nature. We don't know everything, and we're never going to know everything. So if we want to love someone, we need to be aware of that. We don't know everything. Local knowledge matters. Okay, here's some fancy language that Hayek throws in our direction, and kind of put some structure on the argument I want to make tonight, which is that because knowledge is local, we can define 2 different sorts of spheres. What he calls the macro, right, the big cosmos, the big order, or civilization is how we would refer to it. Really big circle enveloping all of us. Versus the microcosmos, the small order, what he says can rightly be referred to as a society. He's very particular about the use of that word. He only likes it to be applied in situations where people really know each other and share some objectives and purposes. So we've got the macrocosmos and the microcosmos, and this understanding from Hayek is important in light of love, because remember, love, to will the good of the other, you actually have to choose according to the good. You really can only love within the microcosmos. This is my thesis. So you can only love people who you know. In the macrocosmos, I'm going to argue, we can do some love-like things that are very important, and we should do them. But with Aquinas' definition of love, we can't, strictly speaking, love civilization. So this is the way I'm going to proceed, talking first about the macrocosmos and then the microcosmos. So what is this love-like thing we can do for our global society, as we might call it today, or what Hayek wants to call our civilization? He's going to argue that markets are an important mechanism for bringing together people who aren't naturally, inherently drawn to one another, right? Historically, humans have been tribal, and it's kind of an amazing part of a cultural evolution over many generations that now we so just confidently engage in cooperative behavior with people that we don't know, that we can't relate to, that don't look like us or don't know anything about us, and we don't know anything about them. This is pretty fantastic. And I'm going to argue, like Hayek would, that this is good for people. I'm going to call it actually love-like. So how is it that we can argue that markets are love-like? Well, here's a data point. If you're not familiar with it, you should commit it to memory. Did you know this? Did you know in just the last 30 years, 1 billion people around the world have escaped extreme poverty? How many people thought poverty was actually going up? Anybody willing to admit that? Because usually 70% of college students think that poverty is on the rocks, but it's decreasing in a massive, massive way. How does that happen? Again, many lectures that we could have on this, semesters of learning. Here's the short version from my perspective. Hundreds of years ago, important attitudes were changed. As a Christian, I think one of the most important attitudes was this slow but important acceptance of what we know from Scripture, which is that each one of us is made in the image of God. And so this universal shared brotherhood, right, is critical for how we view the other, and has shaped attitudes about cooperation as opposed to extraction. So, until 200-300 years ago, and really for the majority of human history, the way people got rich was by stealing, enslaving, taking advantage of other people's resources, right? Taking instead of growing and working together to make more. So when there's an attitude shift that says, you have creative capacity, I have creative capacity, you're human, I'm human, we share things in common, let's institute, facilitate institutions that treat us according to that universal human dignity, that support, let's say, the rule of law and in particular property rights, that give open access, impersonal protection of those institutions. Then and only then can we really think about trading with a person we've never met and will never see or interact with again, that we don't even hardly think of the person that's involved on the other side of the world, and we can actually engage in mutually beneficial relationships with them. And and in particular, a relationship that exists because of trade. Is anyone in here a crafts person, a maker? Do you make anything? Painters? Jewelry makers? Coffee? So we have a barista in our midst.
Yeah.
Anyone else that does something with your hands? I've had students before that have like rebuilt motorbikes. That's always a fun one. Let's use coffee, shall we? So, since we're on the subject of love, one way that I like to express love is baking. So I really love to bake. And let's imagine, I've forgotten your name already, I'm sorry, Jamie. Jamie's a barista, and she wants to start a coffee shop, right? She's also going to be an entrepreneur. And let's say that she expresses love by doing that well for the people she loves. But in fact, as an entrepreneur, she wants to do it probably for more than just the people she loves. She wants to do it as a business. In any case, if I enjoy a good pour of coffee and she appreciates some of the things that I bake, we can engage in trade in a way that benefits us both. And in fact, if it's voluntary, we have these institutions that protect, to establish contracts and protect us from theft from one another, then we're only going to trade if we're both made better off. Okay, so maybe she promises to make me five really great, I actually prefer chai latte. Can you do that? Okay. 5 chai lattes this week if I bring her 2 very nice loaves of homemade banana bread. Okay? So we're only going to engage in that exchange if both of us feel like it's a worthwhile trade, if we walk away better off than with what we came with. And in that way, right, voluntary trade creates wealth. And this is so different than extraction, right, and exploitation, and theft, and slavery. So we can actually create wealth. And even more than that, this understanding, this experience, right? We might not have it figured out in advance, but once we experience, we see, wow, there's an opportunity here. I can engage in exchange and continually walk away better off than I would be with the things that I brought to the trade. This motivates or animates what Hayek refers to as the extended order. This is what pushes people to step outside their tribes and their narrow associations to engage more broadly with people around the world. And what sometimes people refer to, and really in a negative sense, is globalization. But this is where the extended order started, just by seeing there's an opportunity for me and my family if we engage in trade with other families and tribes. Now it's tricky to kind of negotiate those things one-on-one when you're talking not just about 2 individuals or 2 families or 2 nearby towns, but you think about an iPhone and how many different countries are involved in the production of an iPhone. It's hard to think about just negotiating terms of how many loaves of banana bread for how many chai lattes, right? And so that's why we need prices. And prices do this. As long as people are willingly paying prices, as long as sellers are willingly accepting the prices, as long as those prices are free to adjust, it is consistent with voluntary exchange. Additionally, it facilitates an exchange of information. Remember, local knowledge. Hayek actually says that knowledge is essentially dispersed, which is a really strong term that means it's just inherently so. It's always going to be dispersed. And so it is magnificent that prices allow us to act as if we have information we couldn't possibly have. Can I give you an example of this because I think it's really important? So again, baker. So one of the prices that has the potential of really affecting me is the price of vanilla extract. Any other bakers in the room? Do you feel me on this? Really good baked goods require real vanilla extract, not the imitation stuff. Okay, so those of you who haven't really experienced baking yet, make note of that. Don't buy the imitation stuff. Vanilla is grown in just a few countries, warm climates, but Indonesia and Madagascar, I think, are the biggest places. I know very little about it, although I know it's critical for my baking. And right now, the price of vanilla beans per pound is more than the price of sterling silver. I didn't actually know that. What I knew was I went into an Amish bulk food store and I was going to get a bottle of vanilla and I was aghast at the price. And I thought, ooh, something's going on with supply and demand. Right? That's what economists think when we look at prices. And it's true, so I did some research and I found that farming vanilla beans is really precise, difficult work. So of course, the weather affects things, especially because it only happens in a few parts of the world. If there are weather patterns in those two main areas of the world, it can really throw a wrench into things. Apparently there's a particular day that the parts of the plant that need to be pollinated by hand, and it's a very labor-intensive process. So many things. Political corruption in those areas is fluctuating. A number of things that are going on that all contribute. And frankly, I don't know all of those things, but I don't need to, because when I look at a bottle of vanilla and it's $25, I act as if I know that there's something going on in those labor markets. There's something going on with weather patterns that are making the supply of vanilla beans more scarce. And what would we want people to do if they're making wise decisions about products that are in more limited supply? We want them to be careful, right? We want them to be more thoughtful. We want someone like me to say, yeah, this needs to go in my grandma's banana bread recipe, but probably not this boxed cookie mix that I'm going to make just to chow on a Friday night, right? But like a gift that I want to give a friend and it's made from scratch. And so I economize more carefully when I see the price go up. And it's in that way the prices convey information that we couldn't possibly have otherwise. Not only that, prices provide incentives. And it's not just that I realize, oh, maybe there's something going on, supply is decreasing of vanilla beans. I know when supply decreases, that means I should. No, I want to. When I say $25 on a bottle of vanilla, you better bet that my incentives are to be very careful. So it's not just that I have information, but actually motivation to economize. The price mechanism, Hayek says, is a true marvel. And frankly, I think this is a perspective that Christians should bring to an understanding of markets. We should marvel. We should not take things for granted. We should feel immensely blessed, particularly if, like me, you think there's a really good chance that markets are providential. I think they're not of human design, and when I see something good come out of a broken world, I think God has a hand in this, right? It's a marvel, and we should take time to marvel in it. And not just for what it means for our economic systems, absolutely. I think we should consider very carefully Hayek's argument and others about the fact that markets are just better for people than central planning. But I think it goes beyond. I think it goes to suggest that a lot of our relationships in the macrocosmos really should be guided by, not by human design, but by human action and behaviors at a more local level. Markets are just one example of that. So we should have time for some Q&A, I think, in the end, and we can apply this. I think there are definitely applications for what can I do if I care about poverty, or what if I do feel like I have love for people on the other side of the globe. That's great. I think we should, right? I think we should have those feelings, and it's biblical as well to care for the least of these around the world. But what does that look like in the macrocosmos? Compared to the microcosmos or our smaller communities. All right, so let's segue to that, and let's think even about Hayek and where he comes down on this. He's well known for a book called The Road to Serfdom, where he argues against central planning and even interventionism, which he says has the tendency to lead us towards central planning. And even worse than central planning, the tyranny, the actual serfdom that follows from central planning, hence the title of the book. But he's been accused, I think wrongly, of being obsessed with markets, right? Of having a unitary focus on markets and market mechanisms, and those being the solution to all of our problems. This is false. It's just not who he is. Here's a quote, actually, from one of my favorite books he's written, called The Fatal Conceit. He says, if we are always to apply the rules of the extended order, right, the macrocosmos, the big civilization stuff, meaning markets, right, the rules of the extended order to our more intimate groupings, we would crush them. So we must learn to live in two sorts of world at once. He doesn't say, parents, set up price mechanisms for your kids. Pay them for their chores, incentivize them properly, right? Harness both incentives and information in your household. No. He says this is a totally different sort of world. We shouldn't bring the rules of the microcosmos or the family into the marketplace. We shouldn't operate markets with altruism, because frankly we can't. You can't really have care for people you don't know. You don't have the information you need for people that you don't know. And so we have to simultaneously live in these two worlds. So what about families then? Right? This is the microcosmos. This is the second part of my argument. Before I contrast the micro and the macrocosmos in our human experiences within each, let me say that there's something that is true in both scenarios, or in both of our, as we imagine ourselves in both of these worlds. Knowledge is still limited, right? Reason is still fallible, right? Prone to brokenness and short-sightedness. We don't have perfect reason even in our families. And even our goodness. I don't want to suggest that families always have the best of intentions in every situation. I think we can all reflect on times in our lives where we've been selfish, even within our families. Right? So I don't want to suggest that there's some perfect form within the family that we're able to achieve utopia just at small levels. We don't. There's still brokenness there. There's still limitation. However, there is a significant and material difference in these areas when we're thinking on a smaller scale. So Hyatt would say families can rightly be referred to as a society. He really doesn't like the word social. He really doesn't like the idea of society because we append it to everything and social justice, he says, is a way of trying to make it like feel good. This is something we should do, and that somehow we know what is just on a massive scale. This is actually societies require knowing something about your community members, the people within the society, and sharing a purpose. When we share a purpose, our incentives are aligned. And that sounds a lot more like a family or a close friend group or maybe the folks that live on your street. It doesn't sound like our relationship with someone 3 states over or someone on another continent. Not because we think they're lesser than us. We can still think, and we should, I think, constantly reflect on our shared image bearing, our God. But just can't act as societies in the macrocosmos. So within families, though, we have knowledge. Parents have special knowledge about their kids and what is actually good for them. And presumably, parents have concern and care and the motivation to even make personal sacrifices for their good. So what does this mean in practice? This means that families should be centrally planned and operate based on altruism. Parents oftentimes are putting together a strategy for where to go in the next week or next year of their family's life. They might dictate your role, right? Your jobs, your chores. They might, right? Parents negotiate amongst themselves. What is it that we're going to do? And they come up with a potentially well-defined plan. Or maybe it's rules of thumb, or maybe it's more organic than that. But it's certainly not the case that putting our heads together and thinking within our small communities is problematic in the way it would be at a national or global level to try to come up with the plan. Altruism, too. If you think about the common phrase that goes along with the so-called ideal of communism, from each according to their ability to each according to their need, heard that before? It doesn't work at a national level. That's not going to work at the state level. That can work within a family. We would probably look askance at a parent that didn't act that way, right? This child struggles with nutrition, or this child needs extra attention during homework time, right? Or this child needs a metaphorical kick in the pants. right? And we want to see that personalization. We want to see that they're taking their local knowledge and treating different people in the family differently based on what they're capable of and based on what they need in that moment. It's not what we want for civilization. We want impersonal rule of law that treats us all equally before the law. So very different. So I would say it's not that planning is bad. Planning is good. All action requires planning. Coming here tonight required some planning on your part. But where does the planning happen? The location of the decision making is key. He wants to see us align various authorities, right? The responsibility and ability to make decisions with where the knowledge and the incentives live. So child rearing needs to be located within the family. Benevolence needs to be located locally. Justice, characterized by the rule of law, that we can do on a larger scale. But families can operate effectively with altruism. So just 3 takeaways to summarize and maybe give us a launching point to some good questions. First, love is not a feeling. Love is actually choosing to do good for another. And I think this should reorient us towards thinking about what is truly in line with human flourishing. What is good for someone else? Not what makes them feel good, certainly not what makes me feel good, right? But what is their good? What is flourishing? When it comes to a more global scale, the macrocosmos, that the closest we can really get to love is something love-like, which is engaging in trade, supporting markets, advocating for the rule of law and property rights. That's love-like because it does facilitate very good things. 1 billion people out of extreme poverty. That's living under $2 a day, right? Living on less than $2 a day. 1 billion people escape that. That's real. And then if we're convicted, either kind of naturally, I think, by the fact that we're made in the image of God, or if we believe in Scripture, we know that love is an important call. Okay? Love the Lord your God, and love your neighbor as yourself. That we really can only love our neighbor, and truly our neighbor, if we know them, and we're in a position to act accordingly. So I think in application, this means that we should support strong families and tight-knit communities. And then if we feel called to minister to those in material poverty or facing other needs, that the first place we should start is with the person in our family or just down the block. We shouldn't feel like that's a lesser form of service because it's nearby, that it's more meaningful if we step outside of our real knowledge and go abroad. Those things are important. We can talk about how to do that, but really you can't love unless you know someone. So start close to home. Start with the person you share your dorm room with. This is my maybe last bit of advice. So thanks for your good attention tonight. I look forward to answering your questions.